Most missing person cases begin with a mistake. One wrong turn, one delay, one decision that looks small until it destroys everything later. But some cases leave behind something worse than a mistake. They leave behind one image that never stops asking questions. In the summer of 1991, 12-year-old Jared Negrete disappeared on Mount San Gorgonio. Search teams covered the mountain for days, but Jared himself was never found. What remained was a backpack, a camera, and one final photograph taken in darkness. A flash-lit close-up of his face that still unsettles people more than 3 decades later. No confirmed final message was ever recovered from him. No witness could explain what happened after the last reliable sightings ended. Just a boy alone on a mountain, a search that found fragments, and a case that never truly closed. And that is why Jared Negrete's disappearance still feels unfinished to this day. Tonight, we follow the documented timeline of that mountain trip and the clues recovered afterward. Then we look at the theories people still argue about, including some with no proof behind them. Because in this case, the most frightening part is not what people imagine. It is how much of the real story remains missing. Jared Negrete was 12 years old and lived in Southern California. He joined the Boy Scouts like many boys his age and went on what should have been a supervised trip. That detail matters because this story does not begin in obvious danger. It begins in something that sounds structured, ordinary, and safe enough for parents to trust. A scout outing, adult supervision, a mountain trail, and a group moving together. Nothing in that description sounds like the beginning of a permanent disappearance. But wilderness does not care how safe the plan sounded before the climb began. And mountains do not care whether the people on them are prepared enough to survive mistakes. Mount San Gorgonio is the highest peak in Southern California. It is beautiful, exposed, steep, and much less forgiving than photographs make it seem. Air gets thinner with elevation, and daylight disappears quickly near evening. For experienced hikers, it is a challenge, but for an exhausted child, it can become something far more serious. In July of 1991, Jared joined his troop for an overnight expedition in the San Bernardino Mountains. The goal was to reach the summit of Mount San Gorgonio. Reports suggest Jared was not one of the strongest hikers in the group. He was young, he was tiring, and by the second day, those details became increasingly important. That is often how wilderness tragedies begin. Not with sudden chaos, but with a visible struggle that people fail to treat as a warning. A person starts falling behind, slowing down, losing energy, or having trouble with the terrain. That is the moment when safe plans either tighten up or begin quietly breaking apart. In Jared's case, that moment seems to have arrived before he vanished. And that is one reason this disappearance still troubles people so deeply. At some point during the push toward the summit, Jared fell behind the group. Different retellings vary in detail, but the central outcome remains the same in every version. Jared became separated from the rest of the group and ended up alone on the mountain. Whether that happened through confusion, bad judgment, or a direct decision, the result was identical. That is the moment this story stops being just a difficult hike. It becomes a case file the instant a tired 12-year-old is left alone in dangerous terrain. Later sightings suggest Jared was still alive and moving after the separation occurred. One of the most often repeated accounts came from a firefighter who reportedly saw him alone. According to those reports, Jared had moved off trail and was warned not to cut across the switchbacks. The warning mattered because leaving the marked path there could become dangerous very quickly. Other witnesses later recalled seeing a young boy alone and apparently trying to move fast. If those sightings were Jared, he may have been hurrying in an effort to catch up. That possibility has shaped how many people interpret this case. Not as an instant vanishing, but as a chain reaction that spiraled into disaster. Air gets thinner with elevation, and daylight disappears quickly near evening. For experienced hikers, it is a challenge, but for an exhausted child, it can become something far more serious. If Jared left the trail hoping to save time, that choice may have changed everything within minutes. A shortcut in daylight can become a trap when exhaustion, panic, and bad terrain start working together. By the time the group fully realized Jared was truly missing, the situation was already critical. A brief search did not find him, and help was eventually called after daylight had begun to fade. Darkness changes every wilderness search immediately. Trails become harder to read, landmarks begin disappearing, and distances become difficult to judge. A route that looks manageable in afternoon light can become completely disorienting after sunset. For a 12-year-old alone at elevation, that transition could turn confusion into full panic very fast. And if Jared had already moved away from the trail, the search problem grew far larger. He was no longer simply behind the group. He could have been almost anywhere in hostile terrain. The search that followed was massive and used major resources. Ground teams, air support, tracking dogs, and large numbers of searchers combed the mountain. That scale is important, because it is one reason this case never faded cleanly. People hear about a search this big and assume it should have ended with a definite answer. Most viewers expect difficult terrain to eventually surrender some clear, final truth. A body, clothing, a marked path of movement, or at least enough evidence to close the timeline. But Jared's case never gave investigators that kind of closure. Instead, it gave them only fragments, and those fragments raised even more questions. Searchers eventually located a footprint believed to match Jared's shoe. That discovery suggested movement, but one print alone could not explain his final route. Then came the discovery that changed the emotional weight of the entire case. Jared's backpack was found, and inside it was the camera that made the story unforgettable. There were several undeveloped photographs still on the film. Most of them were ordinary enough, the kind of pictures a child might take on a scouting trip. But the final image was different in a way people still cannot forget. It appeared to be taken at night with a flash and from very close to Jared's face. Only part of his face filled the frame, mostly his eyes and nose. There was no clear background, no visible landmark, and no second person clearly present in the image. That was the moment the case changed from tragic to haunting in the public imagination. Because the photo did not explain the mystery, it made the mystery feel immediate and personal. People began asking the same questions every time they looked at that last photograph. Was Jared using the flash to see, testing the camera, or trying to signal for help in darkness? There is no confirmed answer to any of those questions. And that uncertainty is exactly why the photograph remains so powerful after all these years. If the image had shown a location or another person, it might have narrowed the case. Instead, it captured a final known moment while revealing almost nothing about where he was. That made the photo feel less like a clue and more like a frozen fragment of fear. It showed him alive in the dark, but it did not show what came next. This is where the case splits into different kinds of explanation. The first is the grounded version built from terrain, fatigue, and the logic of wilderness accidents. In that version, Jared got lost, left the trail, suffered a fall, or reached an inaccessible area. Searchers may simply never have found him because the mountain concealed the final location too well. Mountains can hide bodies with a cruel efficiency people often underestimate until a case like this appears. Ravines, dense brush, loose rock, runoff channels, and scavenger activity can erase signs of movement. A person making frightened decisions in the wrong terrain can vanish far more completely than most expect. If Jared was tired, scared, and possibly disoriented by altitude or fading light, his judgment may have suffered. A few bad choices made in quick succession could have pushed him into a place searchers never reached properly. That explanation makes sense on paper, but emotionally, many people still resist it. Because when a search is this large, the absence of recovery feels wrong in a deeper way. How does a child disappear so completely on a mountain where other people were present that day? How do you recover a backpack and a camera, but never recover the boy they belonged to? That is where other theories begin attaching themselves to the case, not because strong evidence proves them, but because unanswered space invites speculation almost automatically. Mountains can hide bodies with a cruel efficiency people often underestimate until a case like this appears. Why was a struggling 12-year-old allowed to become isolated on demanding terrain near evening? Why was the group not slowed down, turned around, or reorganized around the weakest hiker? Those questions do not directly solve the disappearance itself, but they matter deeply to how it is remembered. For many people, the first tragedy was not the mountain, but the decisions that exposed Jared to it. And this is where the story becomes especially uncomfortable. Sometimes the mystery is not only what happened afterward, but how disaster was allowed to begin. If you were on that trail and saw a tired child falling behind, what would you have done? Would you have ended the climb immediately? Or do you think the danger looked smaller in real time? Tell me what you think in the comments, because this case divides people before the theories even start. Some viewers focus on the terrain, while others focus first on the leadership decisions. Once the backpack and the last photo entered public discussion, the case took on a darker life. Now there was an object people could study, revisit, and project fear into for years afterward. Why was the backpack separated from Jared? And why was food still found inside it? If he was trying to survive, abandoning supplies sounds strange. But panic does not follow clean logic. If he fell nearby, why was he never found in the surrounding area? If he kept moving afterward, what made him leave behind items that might have helped him endure longer? Those are fair questions, but they do not automatically point toward anything supernatural or criminal. They point first toward fear, confusion, injury, poor choices, and a mountain that may have hidden the ending. Still, some people have long believed an accidental explanation leaves too many loose ends, because Jared was young, alone, and there were other people moving through the general area that day. That leads to the darker possibility that someone may have encountered him after he was separated. A criminal encounter is often mentioned whenever people discuss the unresolved parts of this case, but this theory must be labeled carefully and honestly. There is no confirmed evidence proving Jared Negrete was abducted by anyone. No verified witness publicly reported seeing him taken away by another person. No suspect has ever been tied to the case strongly enough to confirm foul play. So, while the criminal theory remains part of the conversation, it stays speculation rather than fact. It may explain emotional gaps in the story, but it is not supported by decisive public evidence. Then, there is the more mystical layer that eventually formed around the case online. Whenever a disappearance leaves behind strong imagery and weak closure, paranormal theories tend to appear. Some people link the mountain to strange forces, hidden zones, or broader wilderness mystery folklore. Others treated the final photograph almost like a supernatural artifact rather than a tragic piece of evidence. To be clear, there is no proven paranormal evidence in Jared Negrete's case. No official record, verified event, or credible finding supports anything supernatural here. But those theories keep appearing because mystery creates a vacuum people rarely leave empty. When ordinary explanations feel too painful or too incomplete, extraordinary stories become emotionally tempting. In truth, the likeliest explanation may be the most brutal because it is also the simplest. A child was alone in dangerous terrain near nightfall, and the mountain never gave him back. That is not paranormal, but it is still haunting in the deepest way. Reality can feel more terrifying than myth when it refuses to provide closure. A decade after Jared disappeared, another teenage hiker named William Parvin vanished in the same mountain region. Unlike Jared, Parvin was later found alive after wandering off course, injured and badly disoriented. That later case did not solve Jared's disappearance, but it reinforced something important about this landscape. A mountain does not need anything supernatural to turn into a maze for someone already in trouble. Exhaustion, fading light, poor footing, fear, injury, and wrong direction can be enough by themselves. And if those forces could overwhelm an older teen, they could certainly overwhelm a 12-year-old child. Even so, Jared's case remains harder to accept than many other wilderness disappearances, because it leaves behind just enough evidence to feel close, but never enough to finish the story. The age, the separation, the final sightings, the backpack, and the camera all sharpen that effect. Every one of those details feels like it should have carried investigators closer to the truth. That is why this case still stands out among unresolved disappearances in American wilderness history. It feels like the kind of mystery that should have been solvable, and that makes the silence heavier. A child falls behind on a known route, is seen alive afterward, and triggers a major search effort. That kind of timeline usually leads somewhere clearer than this one did. Instead, it led only to one long corridor of unanswered questions. What did Jared do after the last reliable sighting, and where was that final photo taken? Why was the backpack found apart from him? And what happened after darkness fully settled over the mountain? Did he try to descend, hide, rest, signal, or keep moving until the terrain turned completely against him? Or is there still some missing piece in the timeline that investigators never uncovered? A witness, a memory, or a detail nobody recognized as important until it was already too late. That may be the cruelest feature of unresolved cases. They do not become fully past tense, because no confirmed ending ever arrives to close them. Instead, they linger in fragments, and those fragments keep the story emotionally alive for decades. A footprint, a backpack, a camera, a flash photo, and the total absence of the person behind them. So what do you think happened to Jared Negrete on Mount San Gorgonio that night? Do you believe this was a tragic wilderness accident hidden by terrain, timing, and terrible luck? Do you think someone on that mountain saw more than was ever reported later? Or do you think the final photograph points toward a missing piece people still do not understand? Write your theory in the comments, because this case still divides almost everyone who studies it. Some see a devastating accident, some suspect human wrongdoing, and some look for stranger possibilities. What keeps the mystery alive is not only that Jared disappeared, it is that the evidence never settled into one answer strong enough to silence the others. More than 30 years later, Mount San Gorgonio still stands where it always stood. The trails still wind upward, and the ridgelines still darken the same way toward evening. Hikers still move across the same mountain that once swallowed a 12-year-old boy without explanation. And somewhere in that history, one night in 1991 remains unfinished. No confirmed goodbye was ever recovered from Jared. No final location was ever verified, and no definitive recovery ever closed the file. Only a search, a backpack, a camera, and one of the most unsettling final photographs in a missing child case. A flashlit image of a boy in darkness, captured for a second, and then almost completely lost. If there are cases that prove how thin the line is between an ordinary day and a permanent mystery, this is one. Because Jared Negrete did not vanish in legend, but in a real place people can still visit. That may be why the case still disturbs people long after the original headlines faded away. It happened under supervision, on marked terrain, within reach of civilization, and still ended in total uncertainty. And that kind of uncertainty can outlive almost any confirmed answer. Jared Negrete is still missing, and the last photo still has no answer.